Well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon here on the East Coast. Good morning for you guys on the West Coast, and good morning, I guess, for everybody else between there and here. And good afternoon for our followers that are joining us from the UK and points further east than that. We're so glad that you can join us today on our regular live stream on Recovery Live. My name is Tom, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. We've got a great show for you today, guys. We're going to kind of take a step back and then a step forward with a really, I think, timely discussion today for some new people that are coming in to figure out who is Came to Believe and what are you guys all about. We know that our audience is getting larger and larger, and we have 45,000 followers on Facebook. So we know that there are just so many people and thousands more on our YouTube channel. And we're pretty sure that some sign in and they're not exactly sure who we are. And they hear things like they do in retreats in a weekend, and they do the steps quickly. And this Clarence Snyder guy, and who is he? And they hear us talk about recovered and recovering. And we talk about harm reduction and going off and doing all these things that we're doing, and retreats in homeless shelters and things like that, and saving people, and not just alcoholics, but drug addicts and overeaters and all. And I'm sure there's questions in everybody's mind. And so we thought it was time for us to just do a little history and do a little talk about where we came from, how this thing that we call the legacy is being carried forward, and why we're doing what we're doing today, and what we are committed to do in the future, and how we're going to help other people. So I have some very special guests on for our discussion today. Hi, Dee, in our audience says hi, Tom. So hi, Dee. Making sure I want to respond to her. Very special guests coming on today to discuss all this stuff that we think is just important. You know, we all know it from our organization, and sometimes I think we don't know what everybody else knows. So I want to bring my team on that I have that's going to be joining me in this discussion. And it is none other than Steve and Sue Foreman from Winter Park, Florida, joining us, and Dale Barker, our regular on Recovery Live. I want to welcome you guys on to the stream today.
Thank you, Tom.
Hi. Thank you, Tom.
Oh, I thought Casera was waiting for me to say something like, and there is the great Dale Barker, which we didn't say.
Didn't say this time. No.
I thought I would get special music or something when I came on.
Some of us don't know what honesty is.
Yeah, we just got to give him a chance to do his 10th step, Steve. Well, thanks, guys, for coming on today. And it's so great. I just spent some time with you guys down in Florida. I was with Steve and Sue, and we were doing events, and we were talking and meeting some people, and really having a good time. And I spent time with Dale, and any of you that follow my personal Facebook page saw that Dale and I had a wonderful time at the Samantha Fish concert.
Rock on.
You know, we often talk here that we get our lives back, and we get to enjoy lives, and we're not a glum lot. And being able to go and enjoy things like that is something that Dale and I looked at each other during the show. You know, we just wouldn't have probably done this in the day when we were there, you know, in our drinking days, but we're able to enjoy all kinds of things like that today. You know, we talk about, and this is for you, Steve and Sue, people talk about, you know, we hear this all over the country and around the world, the legacy. What's the legacy? You know, our guide that we use is called the Legacy Guide, right? And so what is this legacy, and where did it come from? And how did you guys really get this thing started? Because the Legacy Guide was written by you two, and BJ and Jack and Dale and Carol Morfitt, who all knew Clarence Snyder, this gentleman that we talk about, that some of our people in the audience might not know who he is. So we thought it would be good for you guys to come on and just, you know, kind of briefly, even between the two of you, how did you get this thing that we're calling the legacy today, and get it. How did it get started?
If we just start with the word legacy, it's what we pass on.
Okay.
That's it. So we're just passing it on.
Yeah, I think those who've heard my story know that I first met Clarence at the first AA meeting I went to in 1979, went to my first retreat in 1979, and became a retreataholic. Each year that he had a retreat while we would attend. And for the next 4 or 5 years, the retreat model extended into Leesburg. We moved from a pretty basic camp in Brandon, Florida to Leesburg. Population picked up. And in 1984, of course, Clarence passed. Well, we had been with him to 3 or 4 different retreats. And on the night of his passing, he asked Sue and I to come to the hospital, which we did.
Of course, we didn't know he was going to pass, and he didn't either.
Right, but he said, "Get on your knees. I want to anoint you to be the leader." He used another word that of the retreats, and he said, "I'm about to go. Will you guys take it over?" And so, anointing or whatever you want to call it, shepherd said, "You guys, you're going to be it." So we took that baton and continue to have retreats growing, expanding not only from Leesburg to Wisconsin to New York to here, there, and as far west as Texas. Now we're into California. But anyway, what happened was Jack and BJ Rapp came along 2 years after I had sobered up, and they joined up in the retreat team. And then in 1984, when Clarence passed, here we are now. What do we do? And so what we decided to do, and it took almost 20 years to get it done, was have the 6 of us, which is Dale and Carol Morfitt, Sue and Steve Foreman, Jack and BJ Rapp, sat down in 2004 and decided we got to pass this thing on. It's a unique way. The AA meetings, Clarence used to say, are watered down. The truth is not there. They don't know the history. And so we embarked on what is now called the Legacy Guide. And I'm sure all of you have seen it or heard of it. So the 6 of us took our notes from retreats, personal contact, going through the steps, which Clarence did for me in 2 days, a total of 7 hours. And so in 2004, we reduced what we'd learned, the 6 of us, into a manual, which we call the Legacy Guide. So far, 27,500 of those have been printed, sold, given away, or are in circulation somewhere. So there are believers in this method. It's the old time beginning of AA, back when they were in the Oxford group. Clarence Snyder, for those who don't know, was sobered up in 1938 before the AA book was written, and he attended, as did Dr. Bob, Bill Wilson, and all the early members attended the Oxford group, which was an ecumenical Christian, non-denominational meeting. And a part of that, getting into the Oxford group, meant you had to make a surrender. And so you'll read in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, which should be required reading of anybody who wants to know, where's my thing, and wants to know the history of AA.
Well-worn book. Well-worn.
Anyway, everybody should read that. Clarence is throughout it. What they did in the early meetings is clear. Read the Bible, got on their knees, made a surrender. And that's what happened when Clarence took me through the steps. We got on our knees. He called it hiring a new manager. And so I hired a new manager, and it happened to be in the form of Jesus Christ. So we carry that message in our Legacy Guide. You'll see it very clearly. And so we put together parts of the AA book, parts of Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, and parts of the Bible, and came up with a Legacy Guide. Nothing has changed in that Legacy Guide in the last 15, 20, how many years it is, 17 years since its first printing. There have been some additions and clarity that it was a miracle that we have been able to continue. And so there's some amount of grumbling we hear occasionally over, hey, you guys are really making some money there. I don't know what baloney the cleaning my language up that amounts to, but this ain't a money making operation. And Clarence said it should be an avocation. It's something that he did in his quote spare time of curing people. And the early retreats were run in a group fashion. You can see it in a history book where he had Walter Beilstein had a theater put up above a funeral home, and Clarence would take 50 to 70 people through the 12 steps the same way we do. So our legacy.
I was going to say the other thing is that Clarence and Annette Nelson started these retreats in 1966. He was at that time in Tampa. Annette was in Brandon. And they were noticing the same thing that we've noticed all the time, that people come to a meeting, but there is no way for them to get the program. They read it on the wall, but they don't actually have an opportunity to do it. So they were taking people through individually, and he remembers what he was doing in Beilstein's theater. Well, let's do it again. He finds this Florida camp that Steve went to in '79, and very primitive, Tom. You know how primitive. Steve loves primitive. Yeah. But he went anyway. And they were doing it in the 40s, and they were doing it in the 60s. And then we're kind of in the 80s, following we pick it up in the 80s. That's this baton passing that we experience. And so we've just tried to catch what he was doing. And now that we're like another generation, we all experienced Clarence, and we were still alive. And so we merged everything we know and then tried to do the same thing. But we had, after Clarence died and we started with Jack and BJ helping, and Dale and Carol up there, and other retreats, we had 30, 35 different retreats a year. And we could see that there was an advantage to what each one was learning doing the retreats, but we had no way to communicate or support one another. So that's what we had the book. We were doing these retreats. It's way too many places for Steve and Sue to go. But we in Leesburg, we were sending Dale and Stephanie off to Australia. They went to England. So they were starting other retreats. And other people in Wisconsin were going and starting other retreats. But we didn't, we weren't, we had no opportunity to support one another. So for at least 5 years, all of these people who were trying to plant new retreats were saying, we really need to get together. And we were also watching how some retreats failed because it was just too much responsibility for one person. Or they had the message, they had the heart, they had everything, but they were missing money. They didn't have their own money, because to lead a retreat, it takes money. And for a lot of them, they're putting their own money into it. And I laugh every time somebody is saying, we're making money off this, because they were always accusing Clarence of making money off this stuff. Well, we were in their house. We know exactly that wasn't true. He was putting everything he had into it. He wasn't taking anything out of it. But when we finally were able to respond in 2015, we were able to get about 35 of us together.
All right, hey, Sue, I want to let's put a pin in that just for one second, because we're ready to move right into that.
Right.
I want to put a pin in it right there, and just want to go back and just clear some stuff up for myself and for Steve, and just to for anyone listening. So what Steve and Sue were saying, what Steve was saying about the Legacy Guide is this is an accurate account of what Clarence did with them. This is a documented, accurate account of what Clarence and was taking him and what he got from Dr. Bob. So this legacy, this baton of taking people through the steps a certain way that they put in this book is from the horse's mouth, as they say. Steve and Sue, Jack and BJ, and Carol and Dale and Carol knew Clarence and knew him and had time and spent time with him. And so this was written from personal experience, and from what all I've known, and I know you guys, the integrity is beyond verifiable, that this is an accurate portrayal of exactly what Clarence and the founders were doing. Is that an accurate statement, Steve?
Absolutely. All of us, when we listened to tapes of Clarence, we read some accounts of his and Grace. We tried to piece together. Grace was a bit of a bigger Bible thumper than Clarence, and so she, we went through as each step, we tried to show, okay, here's what it says from Dr. Bob. Here's the history, and the other was the Bible, the good book. We based it on the good book, and we would take some of the verses out of there that were applicable for our legacy. And Grace was part of the after Clarence's death, was part of the putting together this legacy. So it's absolutely, and this came right from Clarence Snyder, who was sponsored by Dr. Bob.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're putting this line, I think, guys, for those in the audience, is it got passed, the baton got passed to Steve and Sue, formally, but as they said, they're leaders, but they don't take any, they've never wanted any big acclaim for this. They just take the responsibility of ensuring its accuracy and being that support at the highest levels for the organization.
Can I say something there, Tom?
Sure.
The Legacy Guide was edited by
Dick Burns,
who wrote many, many, many books, was a thorough history researcher, and he agreed to edit what we had written. And we did not copyright anything because we took everything from our sources and just put it together in a way that could be delivered in an experience, like Steve called it a workbook or a manual, because we needed a way to duplicate what Clarence was just able to bring out of his head when he was taking us through the steps. But we weren't pulling it all out of our heads. We put it in the book so that it was available. And Dick Burns said, you're not writing anything original here. You can't copyright that. So, okay, we didn't make it up. We just relayed it. We just carried it on. So we said, I believe we don't say authored by, we say compiled.
And it does say that in the book. It says compiled by.
Compiled, yeah.
So I think that's I'm pretty good. And if anybody in our audience has any questions of Steve and Sue or anything, please put them in the comment. We're more than happy to field any question or comment anyone has about any of this. So that kind of, for me, would settle. That's where the legacy is. You guys are carrying right from Clarence, right down. And that's flowed down to what we're doing today. But let's take the pin back out, because what we're doing today did come as a result of what, Sue, you were pulling that all together. And Dale and I were around during all those days before 2015, traveling around the country. Dale saw his first snowstorm with me, I think.
Yes.
And some incidents at LA airport, which we won't mention.
Not miserable.
But and we traveled with Grace too. I mean, we were with Grace and Annette and all of them back then. But those, they weren't really growing pains. They were what we call, they were just happenings that were going on led to this thing that happened in 2015. So that is where, that's our next phase here now. We got the legacy. We know what Clarence was doing. We know what he wanted. You guys have put it in it. You knew it. And here we go. Now what? So
It was not
2015,
an overnight affair. That
not
we
an
know that,
overnight affair.
not
Right.
but it was an overnight affair that we did in Leesburg, because all of these people from around the world, from England too, they convened in Leesburg, and they were there for 3 days to bring all of the issues every single person there had in their heart to reach more people. How can we do this? And we see some of these retreats were successful and then they disappear. Why? Because of economic issues with the leaders, because of all kinds of things that might happen. And so we see the demand. How can we respond to this demand? We hadn't even come up with this thing about ending addiction. We were just trying to survive and deliver the message at that point. But it took us 3 times to sort through all of the reasons that we were vulnerable to ending the message, and all the ways that we saw that we might be able to amplify and support one another. And that was the real desire, to be in a community of leaders, to share problems with one another, and to share support for one another.
All right. So that group gets together, and because they saw all these things, and these things sound like reasonable things that a group of people who are trying to dismiss. And I'll step back now. Let's just go back to even more towards the legacy. This thought process of spreading it farther and getting together and trying to think about how to do it. If Clarence had been alive, Steve, just from you knowing him, and he was coming to this summit, and he heard this effort of people saying, we want to figure out how to spread this same message, what would he have thought about that group of people trying to figure out how to do it better? Would he have been on board with that?
Oh, 100%. He not only would have been on board, he would have helped us
He would have led it.
even more than he did with his memories of the past and that sort of thing. No, Clarence would be giving out attaboys and attagirls to those who were involved in spreading this word and continue to be. I mean, the history, and we'll get into that, I guess, in a minute, of a rapid expansion of Came to Believe, where we have a retreat in California, and 25-50% of the people come up and say, how come we've never been told this before?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so we're regenerating what was in the beginning with the blessings, we hope, of creating after our demise. And you know, out of the 6 of us, 2 of the alcoholics are dead. I'm the last remaining standing alcoholic that was sponsored by Clarence in our group. So he'd have been a fan of what we're doing.
I think you would go back without knowing Clarence's mind in the future. You only have to go back to what he did. He started the first AA meeting. He pulled out of the Oxford, and there was almost a fist fight, because he started that first AA meeting where they used the word, the name of the group was the name of the book that had just been published. And then he has this article written in the paper, in the magazine, the things that he sponsored the first woman in AA. Are you talking about, would Clarence be approving of this? If he'd been around long enough, he'd have had us on Zoom a year before.
Right.
He was always pushing whatever it takes to bring more people in. He always insisted that the retreat was not just for the addicted. It was for the whole community of people affected by it. Everyone who wanted to get well was welcome. And he absolutely was committed to Alcoholics Anonymous. He did not want any of this to ever be separate from. Totally stay within the bounds of AA as he knew it. So
Thank
we
you.
don't have to guess what he might have thought. We just look at what he did.
Very good. I mean, that's really, so succinct. So to say, I mean, this is what he did, and he would have been, and you guys know what he would have done, right? He talked to you guys about it. So that's really all we're doing. So let's talk just for a few minutes about what happened at that summit and what came out of that. And then let's move into what we're doing today and why what we're doing today is just so fabulous and why we're doing it and how we're going to do it and how we are going to keep doing it the way we're doing it. So what happened at that summit? Well, I mean, what was the result in as few words as you can do it?
You were there, Dale.
Well, I think everybody just came into an agreement of a path to move forward along. We had the workbook. So we had Clarence's method, the method of the founders, the first big book that was written, the first edition of the first big book. We had what they did that produced so many wonders. So, but how were we going to move on from that? And how we were going to start financing things and how we were going to continue to print the books and continue the legacy into the future. That was my takeaway from the summit, was that we had a path forward and we were in agreement. And I think along the way, personalities have things have changed in some ways because people have different opinions about how to go about things. But I've been involved with what's going on now, and I'm amazed because I wasn't sure it was going to work. And God continues to do for us what we can't do for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we stick to the format that Clarence gave us, that was written down in the legacy guide, and with the same heart and the same feeling of wanting to pass this message on, because it is so vital. That's what I left with from the legacy with, was an assurance, a hope for the future, that this would, and I would have a part in that. Of course, I didn't know what my part was going to be because, I can't read the future. But, since I've taken part in the virtual retreats and I've taken part in travel and doing retreats at homeless shelters now, and it's amazing how powerful this simple message is. Trust God, clean house, help others, take them through the 12 steps, get them moving, get them forward, going forward, changing in a different direction. So it is really, I'm just grateful to be a part of it because it's changed my life. My legacy for my wife and my family and my daughter is on a different path now because of this. Because I sat there and let Steve take me through the steps in 1994.
So
that help others. This allows you to find people to help. Where are you going to find them? Go in a bar and find one? No, you're not. You're going to find somebody who has had a moment to say, "Oh, I think I'd like to do my life differently. Maybe I'll go find out what this is all about. I don't necessarily want to do it, but I'll just be curious."
Right.
Where do you go to find one of those people? And how are they going to find you? Well, these retreats are marketed widely so that anybody just can look at it on the internet and say, "Oh, that sounds interesting," and show up. And people with experience like you and the 300 people that are willing to volunteer in these retreats, they are there, either on screen or on a weekend for 3 days at the service of the newcomer.
Right.
So let's talk a minute about one of the things I think that came out of the summit that everybody agreed to, and we adhered to that today with you guys' blessing. Is that one of the things that was happening, and it was a little bit of that was a change, not what we're doing now, would be that the retreats had gotten, and I'm going to say this, I don't know, in some ways like Christian revivals. They had moved, some of them had moved to a little bit more of an emphasis where right from the outset, because of no fault of the people doing it. It just
Enthusiasm.
But that was one of the things that was brought up at the summit, right? Is that
Right.
this idea that it had moved into this way, and that it was agreed upon by those. Number one, it wouldn't be what Clarence would have wanted.
No.
And it wasn't what AA was. It was not ever meant to be a evangelical revival pitch. It was meant to be. Now, you guys, I'm making these statements because I've heard and talked to you guys. You're the ones that knew Clarence. If I've got this wrong, you guys speak up. If I got it right, let's just say that this is what it was. And there was a decision to say, Clarence used to say, we're what bootlegging Jesus, but it was that we were going to meet the newcomer where they were, and we were going to bring them through the program of recovery. And through that program, they were going to meet the founder. Make no mistake, right? They're going to meet the God of the founders, right?
They might not want to continue the relationship, but at least they'll have shaken hands.
Right. And that they do it from an unbiased, unprejudiced point of view. And also that our retreats do not come with some sort of set of rules or regulations that nobody's agreed to yet when they show up at the retreat. They haven't even heard the message. And that was the way that we were going to move forward. And that's what we're doing today. And that was given the support of you guys. Am I correct, Steve?
Absolutely.
Right.
I want to say that there are so many issues. If you're looking at a big mind map, there are issues that are financial. There's hospitality. There's all kinds of things. But one of those topics at the summit that kept coming up was finding that sweet spot that you just described. Wouldn't you say so, Dale? Because there were those who just wanted to have no conversation and ones that wanted to have an altar call on Friday.
Right.
And in the conversation, we agreed to go back to the work of Reverend Shoemaker, and the staying near the door, because we really want to be evangelical and emotional and show how much we love the Lord. But if that scares someone who has been wounded in a church before they even get to the door, then we're going to suspend that. We're not hiding it. We're just going to be respectful of where that person is. But in fact, of the 35 people there, it was kind of a wide band of what was safe in there. And I don't know that we found, it's not a narrow line.
Well, I know
what's safe.
Stephanie and I went and helped start a retreat. Yeah, we met Liz Rogers in this this town. I won't go into the specifics, but the retreat was in a camp, and the first night they had food and speakers, and it was wonderful. And the second day we went to the steps, and it was wonderful. And then the decision was made to show a movie Saturday night, and it was a Christian movie. I mean, nothing wrong with it. I watched it away, but at the retreat, it was kind of out of place to do that. And I asked the retreat leaders, I said, so you're going to expect 60 alcoholics and addicts to sit around and watch a movie for 2 hours on Saturday night at retreat? I said, that's not Came to Believe. Because we need to be talking about these principles and how we live by them now. And we need a speaker, somebody that's successful at putting into practice and they just looked at me and agreed. But they played the movie anyways.
Yeah.
And within 30 minutes, there was nobody watching the movie. They had all left. And I said, see, we need a message that holds us. And it's not a feel-good message. It's a, serious, you do this, you get that message.
A real message.
A real message. So that was what we decided to do. And I was very happy about that, because I'd seen enough retreats started and fail because they they went that path.
Mhm.
You know, rather than having substance and structure and a way to grow, a path to grow, and a path to, you know, get answers for problems. And how did you do this? Well, this is what I did.
Mhm.
You know, so
With a real person.
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So the thing came out of it. We have some great conversations. Joss, I see your comment about praise and worship songs over the weekend at retreats, and that's been something that's been discussed in the retreat system for 30 years about how that's done or not done. And so we could talk about that in a minute, because it was certainly done to different extents, a lot and a little over the years. And there's been experience at it, and we've had discussions with Steve and Sue and others about what Clarence and what really would have came out of that, and where that came from. But let's just keep going on this conversation. We need to move along quick, because I want to move on to more about what we're doing today and the things that Dale and I have seen in person, and you guys too, Steve and Sue, because you get the reports. And Don Z, we're going to bring him on here in a minute, who's one of our great newest leaders and helpers out in California, who just got a fire on this, and he's going to help us. Wait till you hear what we're doing next week in Cupertino. That and we'll bring him on in a second. But let's just talk about. So the result of the summit was the creation of what we call a 501c3 nonprofit organization,
which BJ ramrodded. Took her about a year to do it, but she is amazing.
Right. So what that is, for those that don't know, it's a legal entity that just allows an organization to be able to raise money legally, but it comes with a whole bunch of regulations, rules, and restrictions. It does not allow for profit, right? There's a surplus. You can have a surplus. So there can be a surplus, but it does not allow for a profit. The purpose of a nonprofit organization is to help the good of the community, of the people. It's to raise money and resources that go to the community and help people. And we'll talk a minute about the things that we have done, raised by, if you want to call it, self-sustaining through our own contributions, people that love us and hear our message. They're our people, and they give us money. And as far as I'm concerned, those are our people giving us, sustaining by our own contributions. We don't take corporate lobbying money. Like, somebody doesn't call us and say, you will give you money if you do this. Like, that's not how it works. And I think some people out there think that, that we're some sort of a corporate structure, and nonprofits are not that way. Sue, you've had so much experience with them and charitable organizations and how well they work, but it has freed us to be able to do more work. So that was a result.
It's freed us. But it's also accountability and transparency,
right,
which is another one of those threads from the summit. It's transparent so that anyone can see where the money's coming and going. Right. It's not just in somebody's bank account slipping in and out where it's all merged. Not that anybody was taking any money. It's just the perception. So it protects the leaders. As Dale said earlier, the liability, and it allows it to continue, which is the principles over personalities. It brings out that AA principle to the work that we do, in that it is an entity that is led by many people's opinions, a group consciousness that is not one person's baby. It's not a privately owned dictatorship. It is an entity that makes us accountable, that makes us transparent, that lets you pass on all that you've learned from person to person. And it is not one person's idea. It is the group.
And in nonprofits and charitable organizations, in order for them to meet their missions, they all have paid people. AA has.
Well, they will. Well, they will, if they're going to be successful. They've got to have somebody.
I looked up this morning that the organization of AA has almost a $3 million salary budget, and nobody would say that that's wrong. They need to be able to hire some people to do the message that they're doing. And in
So
fact,
the administration, there's
you
so
know,
much
does
administration.
anybody know that every church they belong to, where do you think the pastor's salaries come from? Do we think that the leaders that run the missions don't deserve salaries? So every pastor and every Sue that what did Sue tell me the other day? Otherwise, it would be only for the rich. You know, the only rich people could do this. And so
Right.
just a little clarity for anybody on what an actual nonprofit is. I hope that cleared it up, and what it's allowed to do, what the money is, and what accountability that we do have. So now
I want you to say that again, Tom, because our leaders don't have to be wealthy enough to carry the load. That is so important that we just can't limit our leaders to the people who are wealthy enough.
Right. So now let's move this message on, and we'll bring Don on here if we can. Cass, who's in the background doing wonderful work, keeping us on track here. And let's talk a bit about actually what we're doing today. Let's talk about what this nonprofit has allowed us to do, and what this organization with the people working behind the scenes. I mean, this stream that we're doing right now that reaches all these people would not happen otherwise. Okay. And this has helped so many people and raised so much awareness. We've started retreats because somebody came on Recovery Live and heard us, and then came to a retreat and started a retreat and saved people's lives. The string goes down of how this is. And that's what we're doing. We met Don Z. I want to, about during the pandemic, right? Don, you found us on the virtual retreat, right?
In early 2020, after 10 years previous to that, dining with some friends, a guy named Dale Marsh and his wife Valerie, and we just munched some tacos, and that was the seed that planted us finding to believe when the pandemic hit. Dale just hooked me up and said, "Dude, this is virtual. Get on it." So I said, "Okay, let's do this thing." And the mystery of that whole deal was, after that first virtual retreat, I've been working with men out of the book for 30 years, and then bam, here we are. And it's like, wait a minute, what did I just do in a weekend? And I just asked the God of the Fathers, I said, why is this so attractive? And I really didn't hear an answer. So I went to the next virtual retreat. And then I prayed the same thing afterwards. And then I heard, you like it because there's a 93% success rate here. And in this valley, there are 625 AA meetings a week. And I dare to say that the success rate is far lower, a low single-digit percentage. But who's keeping count? Who's keeping track? I don't know, but we're bringing it here. We're going to have a party. Looking forward to it real quick next weekend.
Right. So what we've been able to do with our outreach here is we decided, all of that group that Sue talked about, that started right back from the summit, was how do we spread the message, and how do we do it in a more effective way, and how can we reach more and more of the addict, and so that we don't have to hear, why didn't anybody ever tell me this? And so we've gotten support from behind the scenes, and we're seeking more support. And what it's allowed us to do, guys, is that we continue to never turn anyone away because of money. So we've never turned anyone away that can't afford it. And that comes from people helping and donating. That allows someone to come and hear the life-saving message. It is vital for us. We have been able to do things like watch people at City Team in California. And Don was there with us. He came with us. We went to this shelter. And you guys, this is stuff that would not have happened if we didn't have some financial. We did it for free for them, but it wasn't free, right? So and nobody got rich, and nobody gets paid for doing the 12-step teachings. Let me just say that. When we're out volunteering and teaching the 12 steps, none of us are getting paid for that. We do this. We don't get paid to teach the message. So we did it for them, right, Don? And these people's lives were changed. Dale, you were there. Don, you were there. And we watched these people who wouldn't have heard it and wouldn't have had any opportunity to get it. And it lit my fire to say, we got to keep this like we have, keep this going. Since then, we went to the shelter in the Bronx, with Dale was with me for that too. And that would never have happened if we didn't have some resources and some funding to be able to bring the team in and pay expenses only, just so people could come in and do it.
Mhm.
We changed lives. We're changing lives everywhere. We had one of the largest retreats we've had in years up in Schooley's Mountain. Dale was there. And the result of that, because we did that, was a talk I did out on Long Island with 100 people, and some of them walked out on me because they don't like the message that we tell. And the message is this message. That's step 3, we get on our knees, and they didn't want to hear that, but we did. But another 100 people were touched by the message. So see how this is going? And we're seeing it. And Dale, you've been with me now for the last year in a bunch of these places, and it's just amazing what we're seeing, isn't it?
It is. We're reaching people that would never be reached in any other way. We're filling a gap, and the city team's staff changed their program to include what we do as a result of the changes they saw in their people. So that is all the compliment that I need to what happened, what God did that weekend, was that they incorporated what they saw us do into that program at that. And now that this year they're having another one. And their people are doing well. And the people in New York City, the guys are doing well. The ones that have left have gone on to get jobs in their own places. They're no longer homeless people, and they're no longer, they're contributing, packing into the stream of life instead of taking from it. There's so many things in our big book that talk about how we live different after having had the spiritual experience as a result of the steps. And it's in the book if people read it. But we're only doing those things that need to happen, for people to experience this on a wider scale, in a ongoing, long range scale. I mean, 50 years from now, this needs to still be happening. That's the thing. That's the reason for what's going on.
That's the thing, Dale, right there.
And we're all dead.
Bingo.
And Clarence has now been dead 100 years. 50 years from now, this needs to keep going because it has the power that we need. We were powerless, and now we have the power to live our lives in a way that is, it's miraculous that we get to do what we do without drinking, without drugging, without using people, using our talents that God gave us. It's the most important thing I think about every day. Besides the Red Sox.
Right.
You just described our legacy.
I know.
And that's the whole purpose of what we're doing.
Right.
Our generation, and believe it or not, some of us are in our 80s. We need to have the baton passed on to the Dales and the Toms and the Dons, and the message continue and multiply. And that's what we see happening, not only here, but all over the United Kingdom, Ireland, Britain, Scotland, wherever we go. It's a message people love to hear, and particularly the life-changing solution that's offered.
And we have a team over in the UK who is some senior leaders over there in the UK, and Dee just put up that they had 80 people come to a Kent retreat. They have the same success going on, but those group over there in the UK are following this same legacy that is being passed down from you guys. And it's the same thing. And that's the legacy that we're going to keep rolling, is this same one. And it'll be consistent all over the world, wherever it is. And it comes straight down from the top, from you guys who knew Clarence yourselves,
I'd say it comes straight up from someplace else.
Yeah.
I think it's straight up
Yeah.
from the people who are desperate for recovery. It comes straight out of our history. It doesn't come. If it's the top, it's not us. It may come from the top, but don't for a minute think that that means it's us.
Well, I love that. There's some humility.
Yeah.
There's some good nuggets coming out of this, and just an observation. I'm just stuck with the thought that God really knows who He is, and He knows what He's doing.
That's a possibility.
Got here at just the exact right heartbeat, the right time. Are we being moved to just carry the message? We sure do. And then another thing came. There seems to be like we have to protect this thing. Well, you know what? The truth really doesn't need any defense. We just go on and be about the business as we're led to be. And if you've fallen in love with the God of the founders, the anonymous God of Alcoholics Anonymous, of all recovery, that's beautiful. And maybe He'll lend you a building where you can go ahead and coordinate with the staff and everything. And then the beautiful Came to Believe organization from the other side of America that puts together all the nuts and bolts and sends 100 legacy guides to your doorstep and puts the whole thing together and then shows up and participates with this life-saving message. There's 90 people that are going to be in this auditorium that are going to be presented with something that they've never imagined was possible before. And that's freedom from the bondage of self. Wow.
Amen. Yeah.
How can that be?
It's a miracle.
It is. So it's so good. I'm going to try it another day. And
well, that's a mic drop. That's a mic drop, Don. That was that was good. So guys, it's we've got about 5 minutes left. I think we've done, it's just a great conversation. I hope for you guys in the audience, it was great for you. We weren't able to hit every single piece of the conversation today. There's some comments coming in. We'll have more. We're here every week. And we're discussing everything about recovery. And guys, if you knew, there's some things I'm getting ready to go do, and the National Peer Recovery, some groups of other recovery group specialists, people. There's other groups in this country figuring out how to get people recovered. And yes, we're in conversation with all of them, and we should be. I think Clarence would have said, yeah, go talk to them too.
Absolutely.
Their hearts are the same. We're in conversations with all of them. And
if any of us had the real answer, we would have ended addiction. The only way we are going to have an impact on anything like this insidious disease is doing it together. The collective impact of all of us from all angles, as many ways as we can do it, in as many days as, all the good you can do, as many places and as many ways as you can do it.
And make no mistake, guys, all we're doing in the background, I say this to Lisa and Casera and anybody that's in it, everything we do is aimed at that alcoholic or addict that's suffering. It has to flow down to helping them. It's our mission is to move this legacy. Everything we do is to touch as many of those as far out as they are. And this weekend, Don, I can't wait. I'm coming out next week to see these people being brought from 2 or 3 different shelters, guys. Again, here we go, reaching those that would have no chance to hear this message. And we're going to do it.
Tom,
So,
I think we're that trip. It might be an example of why we have a 501c3, because there are individuals in California who are sending reasonably sums of money. There are some in New York, New Jersey, Orlando. We had a breakfast earlier last week, and 35 people showed up. I've already gotten a check in today. I'll get a couple more in. So the reason we're able to do that is because people can contribute to a tax-sheltered, tax-deductible entity. So that's one of the reasons we formed this, to allow people to get a tax credit for what they're giving us.
it
And
would
the
not
other is
have.
that they can trust where the money goes because it's regulated. They can trust where that
It's
money
also
goes.
legal too. You guys will stay out
Yeah.
of
Legal.
prison, but
Yeah.
it's legal.
Mhm.
Right, right.
Exactly.
We're just giving to Caesar what Caesar. Steve, you're exactly
Yes.
right. This
Mhm.
retreat this weekend, these 90 people wouldn't be hearing this message. And so, and it's really because we had generous donor say these people need to hear your message. So it's
Yeah.
exactly what we're doing. And that's
And
all
if-
we're going to do.
And if you want to grow spiritually, help other people go through these steps, these 12 steps,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what the big book talks about. The more you help people, the more you grow.
Mhm.
It's a functional part of this program is to help others. So I would just encourage you to get on board and let's do this thing,
Let's
because
do it.
we are helping others.
Mm-hmm. All right, I want to thank all you guys for showing up today, and I think we did a great job talking about this, and I'm so happy that we did it. Glad to see you, Steve and Sue. Dale, not so glad. You know, you had to mention the Red Sox. I didn't mention the Yankees, if anybody notices. I
No, I did.
refrained.
I noticed I was going to make it up.
Yeah,
Yankee, 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 Yankee.
there we go. And Donnie Z, we're so excited to come out there next week.
Yeah,
We know that
Don.
the T's have been crossed and the I's have been dotted, and people are going to get touched next week. And then we're going to be on in Nevada City, and we're going to be on in other places around the country. And we'll see you all on Recovery Live next week at the same time, 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific for Donnie Z, early morning for him, 11 Central, and 5 p.m. for all of our followers over in the UK. Everybody have a great Super Bowl weekend. And we didn't talk about the Super Bowl today too, which is not the point, but I guess we got to vote. We got to root for San Francisco for Don. I don't know, for the California people. I'm going out there, though I don't really care. But thanks everybody for being with us today, and we'll see you again. Remember, absolute, honest, unselfish, pure, and let's do everything in love, guys. Have a great weekend.